Hi and welcome to everyone to the Modern Endpoint Management Summit 2022. It's nice to see so many of you. And in this session, we're going to hear about Windows policy management through Microsoft Intune. First, I want to thank all the sponsors for making this possible. We have 2 gold sponsors and 5 silver. That's amazing that we can have this for free. This is a global event with more than 8,000 attendees, and we've tried to make the impossible. Now, to make the sessions fit into your time zone. That's not possible, so of course we are recording the session, so you can go and play it on demand up to 30 days on the platform. Now, ask questions during the session. We have a Q&A where you can be anonymous, but please use your name so we know who you are. You can as well use the chats and say hello, chat to everyone. But for questions, use the Q&A so I can follow along. I will be the moderator. My name is Mattias Melkersen, and I've heard from Pierre that he actually said we are going to give away a book for the best question during the session. And the book we're going to give away is the Mastering Microsoft Endpoint Manager. And that is the book created by Pierre and Christian Brinkhoff, the Microsoft from the Windows 365 team. So again, this session is recorded. So if you don't want to be recorded, feel free to leave. But we don't see your face, we don't have audio on you. So I guess it will be okay. Else I can say that I know the speaker personally. He has helped me along on my journey. He's a very kind personality and his professionalism is way too cool. We will all have to have the joy of that the next 40 minutes. So I just want to welcome you, Per Larsen, to the stage.
Thank you, and I hope I have sound on. So I'm going to talk about the policy management today. My name is Per Larsen, as Mattias mentioned. I'm a senior product manager inside the Microsoft Endpoint Manager engineering organization. We are in a team that helps our most strategic customers to deploy and unblock what they cannot do today and what they want to do in the future. And that is what the most of my day goes with, hearing what customers actually need and learning from them what they're trying to accomplish and especially why they're trying to accomplish it. We are very interested in the why customers want to do a specific thing and try to help them on the journey. Today, I will talk about the policy management inside Intune and on Windows. My main focus is on Windows. I also do specialized devices like MTR devices and Surface Hub and HoloLens as well. So let's begin. So this is the agenda for today. Working from anywhere, that is something that we need to do today. During the COVID pandemic, we saw a lot of customers that was not ready to work from anywhere. They were not ready that the end user was sent home. So that is something that we will go into. Also to tell what did we hear from customers, what the pain point and what actually drove them to do policy management from within Intune, some of the best practice and so on. And that is where we're moving on to what has changed in policy management, especially when we compare to group policies that we were used to do with GPOs in our on-premise environment. And then a little about how to get started. We have 2 different approaches. I will get into that at a later state. And then some monitoring. We just released some new reporting options when we're talking about policy management, and I will share some of those options you have when we're talking about monitoring. So basically the landscape changed. So right now we are working from anywhere. End users is working from anywhere. IT admin is working from anywhere. It's not always that they are connected to the on-premise network. Inside Microsoft, we also did some changes during the COVID. Before we had always on VPN. We don't have that anymore on our Azure AD joint devices. We have the option to use VPN if we need to have access to application. And yes, we still have some application that needs on-premise connectivity. It's not many. I have 2 applications that I use not on a daily basis, but I use them 3 to 4 times a year where I need to go start up my VPN connection. And I assume that that is the same for every other company that you still have on-premise needs or need to have access to on-premise things. So what actually changed? That before the IT admin and the end user were on premise, and it has been that for quite some years. And with the pandemic and everybody was sent home, we saw that first the IT admin and the companies needed to start patching the end users' devices. We saw VPN traffic being tunneling into the companies, even for Windows updates. So we have some options for the update management. I will not cover that piece of it today. We'll only I'll talk about the policy management. What we also saw during the COVID was many IT security departments in organization were saying, yeah, can we push out these security changes to our devices? And how do we do that? If the end user is working from home, are they actually connected to our environment? Can we monitoring on how they are getting these policy and what effect it has on their devices? And we also saw a uptake on our zero trust strategy, where Intune plays a big part of that to set the device compliance based on some settings you can do. We will not go into either zero trust or compliance policies today, but it's quite important to know that we have these options where we can check for if the device is encrypted, if it has AV running, and so on. And if the device is not compliant, we can block them from having access to on-premise environment with VPN or to cloud services within Azure. So how is the landscape with the Microsoft Endpoint Manager? We have one product now. We are one team inside Microsoft. We have some different options depending on how mature your company is, what your needs are. Do you have devices that are on-premise and only lives on-premise? We have one option. And if you're ready to go pure cloud with Azure AD joint devices, we have some additional option as well. And then we have the in between, where we have co-management. Co-management, you can move different workloads. You can, for example, move the settings management workload, so you will get policies straight out of Intune and not get policies from Configuration Manager. That is not the same as we are blocking DPOs. We have one option to block some of the DPOs. I will come into that later. But we also have the tenants attached. That is the easiest way that you can go out and do cloud attached today. It do not require that the devices has access to the internet, because the communication goes from the endpoint manager backend to the configuration manager console. The configuration manager console have the traffic back and forward with the client. We see a big uptake in tenant attached for devices that need security settings like MDE, tamper protection, and so on. And again, I will come into some of these options, how you can configure it, and what kind of policy you should use. So when we're talking about the Windows management and devices, we have these three options, at least when we're talking about endpoint manager. We have the cloud-only devices, we have the co-managed device, and we have the tenant-attached devices. We actually have a fourth one, and that is an MDE option, where you can use the MS Sense stack to communicate between the backend inside endpoint manager and the client. That is in preview right now, and I will not cover that much of it, but I will cover a little bit as we move forward. So what has changed in policy management? One of the things that we normally talk to customers about when we're talking about the migration or the change from group policy to Intune management to CSP is, back in the days where everybody was doing group policy, it was on-premise. We actually call it kind of a fire and forget method. So if you set a policy, you assume that it hits the device. There's no reporting back. You don't know if it's actually applicable. You do not know if it has effect on the device. So when we're talking about Intune and the MDM stack, we have the option to push out a policy, but we're also getting information back if the policy is applied to the device, if it is a success, if there's a conflict, and if it has an error. So let's move on to how should you start creating policies, and which kind of policy should you create, and in what order. We know it can be quite a hassle because we have so many options. The more options that we provide to you as an IT admin, the more complicated we make this. We are trying to make it more easy, and I will show that a little bit later. So our clear recommendation is to start with security baseline if your company is ready for it. If you're not ready for security baseline, or you have some requirement that needs disabling some of the settings in the security baseline, there's nothing in security baseline that you cannot configure in any other policy. And that is one of the main questions that we get. Are there actually differences? But there's no differences. We only have one method of deploying policies, that is through the MDM stack. And what can Windows actually take on and apply to the device? So there's no special policies within the security baseline, but it is a baseline from our recommendation on what you should use. Then we have the individual settings. From an IT security perspective, and if you have an IT security department, you can, with advantages, use the endpoint security blade to configure all of your security policies. And if you cannot find the policy in there, you can use the settings catalog. One of the main questions we get is about the attack surface reduction rule. It takes us way longer to implement new settings in the endpoint security the way that it has been working in the past, and we are moving that along as well, so we can get policies way faster into the endpoint security blade than we have done in the past. But if you do not have the setting in endpoint security, you can use the settings catalog. You also have the templates. The templates is using CSPs and is based, if you want to do something specific, that could be create a kiosk profile, a DCFI policy, or something like that. And last, we have the ADMX templates. ADMX templates we are also putting into the settings catalog. So it's basically up to you if you want to use settings catalog or ADMX templates. But right now you will get a better monitoring option with the settings catalog, and it's working a little bit different. And I will go into that in my demo. And then you need to assign it to an Azure AD group. That can be either a device group or a user group. And last year we introduced filters, so you can filter on your assignment. I will not go into how to assign a policy, but I will dig into what kind of policy actually applies to a device and a user, and where is some of the differences. So when we use the security baseline, it is a set of settings that we recommend you to use. And one of the easiest ones to implement is the Edge security baseline. It's just enable it and go test. Always test, especially with the security baseline. But there's also a security baseline for Windows 10 and Windows 11. Inside the endpoint security plate. When we are talking about settings catalog, we have the option to search in here, and we are showing both CSPs and ADMX based. This is the storage CSP, where you can enable it and configure different settings based on values. Some of the settings have multiple values. And you can see in here, I actually have 2 policies. So let's take a closer look on the top one. The policy conflict, MDM wins over DPO. This is one of the most common questions that we get when we are talking to customers about migrating policies or starting to look at policies, especially on hybrid join devices, where the device is already getting DPOs out to the device. So MDM wins over DPOs is for every Windows setting we have as a CSP, not as an ADMX based. So it's only blocking policies that have an equivalent CSP on it. It's very important that you don't think that you can have a, let's say, a Edge policy for the new Edge inside Intune and one in the DPO, and you have 2 different settings. You will have a race condition on which one will actually win on the device. This policy will not block and help you with that race condition. So you need to take a stand, especially on a hybrid device. When are you going to use DPO? When are you going to use a MDM based policy? And our clear recommendation is keep it as simple as possible. If you can move everything into MDM, that is the best option. One of the advantages of using MDM policies over DPOs is that the device only needs to have internet connectivity to be configured with these policies, where the DPOs inside the on-premise AD, you need to have line of sight to a domain controller to do any kind of changes. So with the settings catalog, it's also different from some of the other policies we have, especially inside the templates. As you can see, we have categories, but we also have a minus back after the category or specific settings. So you can remove those, and if you remove them, you can re-add them in again if you need them at a later point. If there's not set on active settings, it will go down to the device as as not configured. Just bear in mind that if you remove, let's say, the allow fast reconnect and we remove it, next time it checks in, it will no longer be locked on the device, and you can, or the user can, change it on the device. When we are talking about different kind of settings, you can see in the slide that some of the settings has a user beneath it or behind it, and some of them don't. So if there's not any user behind it, that means it's a device-based setting. And if there's a user behind it, it is a user-based settings. And why is that actually important? So that is important because user scope will go down to the registry hive within the current user, where the device scope will go down to the device and be device-wide. One thing to be aware of is that whenever a device checks into Intune, there will always be a device ID. So device policy will always be assigned and applied to the device. But it's not necessarily it has a user ID. That depending on the check-in time and if there is a user signed into the device. So let's say you're deploying a policy to a userless device and you're trying to do a user-based policy. That will never be applicable on a userless less device. So what else can we say about the device scope versus user scope setting? So a device scope policy assigned to a device, then all the users on the device will have that policy in effect. If a user scope is assigned to a device, then all users will have that policy. That should be pretty straightforward. And if a user scope policy is assigned to a user, that signed in user will have that policy. And if a device scope policy is assigned to a user, the device scope setting will apply to all the users on the devices. Some of these, we did some changes in our documentation to actually clarify this, because we got a lot of question on why did this policy not apply to the device? Why was it not applicable? Why did it show as not applicable inside our policy report? So it's quite important to know these things. Basically, it's nothing new. So if you look back and at GPO, there was also user scope policies, there were device scope policies, and you had loop back policy as well to have a user-based policy assigned to or be applicable on a device. So there's nothing new about it, but you need to rethink some of the things that you're doing. And every policy within our templates is by default device policy. Otherwise, we have a note in there that it's a user policy. So inside the settings catalog, you can select. Inside a template, it's always a device policy. So here's an example of a template that can be a device firmware configuration interface, where we can configure the BIOS settings. This can only be done on a device where it's supported, and right now it's only Surface devices. And there's also a requirement on how the device is onboarded. So it needs to be onboarded through Autopilot, and the device needs to be uploaded either by the OEM, so in this case, Microsoft with a support case, or a Microsoft partner, otherwise it will not work. So we also have ADMX-based policies. So the ADMX-based policies is for Windows where there's no CSP for it. This also for Office, it's for ads, it's for Internet Explorer. Internet Explorer is going out of support later this year, but there is still policy that you need to configure, especially if you have Internet Explorer enterprise mode enabled. And then there's third-party ADMX. We just whitelisted the Chrome a couple of weeks ago. So when we're talking about ADMX-based policies, you have two options. You have the ADMX-based policies within the templates, with the administrative templates, and then you have it within the settings catalog. So let's see if we can go in and into a demo. I'm just going to find my console. So if I go into devices and under Windows and configuration, and I'm going to create a new policy, you can see we have different policy type. We have settings catalog and we have templates. I will go into the settings catalog. I will give it a name, and then I can add the settings. So most of the settings here are CSPs. We also have some of the administrative templates here. You can see we have the Chrome one. You can add one of them and select the settings, and you will get them over there. We can go down and search for Edge. And you will see the Edge setting as well. So from a security perspective, a clear recommendation when you're using two browser or multiple browser strategies, it's a good idea to set the same security settings on both policies for both browsers. Let's see if I can get my browser working. It seems like it froze. Always good with a live demo.
Maybe we could have a question then.
Yeah.
We have Gideon asking, is it possible to push power settings without forcing so that the user can change like group policy preferences?
No, and we don't have group policy preferences today. And just bear in mind, when we're talking about policy management, one thing is what we can do with Intune, but if the OS do not support it, we cannot do any kind of changes. And the MDM stack do not support group policy preferences at all. So that's the reason why we cannot do it from within Intune.
All right. So while you find into your settings catalog again, then have next Andres Sanchez. He asked, at the moment, it's only the half of the settings in settings catalog, or even Omar Yuri, than in GPO. Will them be on the future? I'm not quite sure. Did you get that, Pierre?
Yeah, it's a question that we get often. So what do we do with policies that is not in there? Basically, when you're doing policy management, you should start with security settings. Then you should start with whatever helps the end user. I would not go out and recommend you to take every setting you have in GPO and actually just implement it within Intune. The only thing you accomplish by that is changing one tool to another tool. You are not modernizing. You're not looking at why do we actually need this. Last year, we whitelisted 3,100 policy settings from the Windows side. And when the Windows side is whitelisting these policies through the MDM stack, we can configure them by Intune. So again, we cannot configure policies that is not inside Windows. So let's go down to my Edge policy again. I can take the extension one. This is also one of the things that we get often. So allow specific extension to be installed. So when we do it, you can see there is a line. So this is a multi-value field, and we have that in extension, we have that in ASR rules and so on. So just bear in mind that the best practice is not to use a separator, but it is to do a add, so you actually have the lines beneath it. It can fail if you're using the wrong separator, and if you're using a separator and then adding another one, it will fail when it's going down to the device. So that is a huge issue. So let's go into the endpoint security to see the different policies. And hopefully it shows correctly this time. We just updated our UI. So earlier you actually saw 4 different options in here. There was one called Windows 10 and later. And when we put in Windows 10, Windows 11, and Windows Server, one of the questions that we got is, should we actually upgrade and migrate to those policy, because it's stating Windows 11, and that is the newest option. So this one have the capabilities to go down to the MDM stack, and it has the capabilities to go down to the MS-Sense stack. And this one is for, it's saying config manager at the end, and that means tenant attached. So the device do not need to be MDM managed. It do not need to be in Intune to get those kind of policies. So let's go into this one and see. We have some different options. I will select the security experience and give it a name. And for this one, I will just enable tamper protection, and I will assign it and move it ahead and create it. So one of the things you can see here, you have the target. This one is the old policy that I was talking about. I don't have those. You cannot create those anymore. But down here, you can see you have the one that we created, endpoint 02. That is stating both MDM and Microsoft Sense. This is using a different backend, so you also have a different kind of reporting. But if you go down to, I'll take this one that, as I already have assigned it, you will have our new reporting agents engine. So that will give you a way better reporting and a more accurate numbers when you're looking at the device assignment, the device status, and errors and so on. And you can see if you go down to attack surface reduction, we still have the Windows 10 and later, and that is only because we have it in our backlog, and our developers is coding on it. And at some point, you will also see the new policy settings go in here. Mattias, is there any question on
Indeed, there
policies?
is. And Bilal is asking, will Microsoft support, for example, SIS or NIST framework as a baseline?
We have no current plans on doing it. You can implement those policies yourself. So it is just a framework. So when you get these policy, I know that some of them has import policy options for Intune. NCSC in the UK have policies that you can import directly into Intune. I'm not sure about CIS policy baseline if you can import those. So how do you get started with policy management? Basically, you have 2 options. you have a fresh start, or you have three options. You have a fresh start where you're starting completely fresh. We see some companies doing that, and they have a very good result by starting with security policies that helps users enable OneDrive known folder move, configure the browser so it actually fits the need of the end user, and then they leave the rest for the end users. But we also have group policy analytics. So instead of you going out and validate all of your policies, we have a tool to do it. And that tool is called Group Policy Analytics. That will show you how many of your policy settings is MDM based and will actually work through a MDM system. And some point in the future, our feature PM just posted it on Twitter a couple of weeks ago. We are going to create a migrate button so you can migrate the policies with it directly into Intune. I would really recommend you to use the start fresh option instead of taking all of your policies. Just go through the group policy analytics. You're just changing your tool. There can be advantages of changing the tool, but you are not looking at what did we actually do wrong previously. We have had customers trying to implement old net meeting policies that is not even applicable to Windows anymore. So we have all kind of policies that customers is trying to integrate within Intune. And again, some of them that you cannot use is blocked on the Windows side, and as long as it's blocked on the Windows side, we cannot do anything about it. More questions, Mattias?
Indeed. We have George. For GP, we can find those that aren't preferences in the policies keys computer users, but the CSP locations are not unique as such, but differ between endpoints. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. As a ground rule, we are saying you should not look at the registry value to look at a CSP. So not everything that you're setting by a CSP can be seen on a device in the registry values. You should use the monitoring option to actually see if you have a policy and a settings being applicable and applied on those devices. I know that IT admins have been doing this for years. When they're validating, they're going to create a GPO, they're pushing it out to the device, they're going into the registry hive to see if it's actually there or not. So for some policies, you can still do it, but I will highly recommend you to start to look at the monitoring, because we are getting the information back to Intune, and you should be able to see if the setting is actually applied or not. Hope that was response enough. So we have different kinds of policy options within Intune, and we also have different kind of reporting options. So depending on if you want to have operational reports, organization report, or historical report, or even if you have specialized reporting. I know that there's a lot of community solutions out there for specialized reporting, so you don't necessarily need to go out and create your own. But also for something like diagnostic settings, you can export it into a log analytics workspace, and you will be able to query the data in there. So what did we change a couple of weeks ago? So we changed our reporting backend. So if you have been using Intune like I have since 2015, it was actually the Silverlight portal. We had some great reporting options in Silverlight. There was a lot of other issues with the Silverlight. So when we moved to the new portal based on Azure, we got reporting option, and as I showed before, it was all down to the donuts. That donut is not live data. So basically, when you are troubleshooting, I've had this discussion with Mattias a couple of times. So when he was troubleshooting, seeing how far was the policy actually went out to the devices and how many devices did receive it, there is a latency, and you cannot trust the data inside the donuts, and that is one of the reasons why we changed it. So instead of a donut, we have these bars. So you have a success, you have an error, you have a conflict, and you have a not applicable. So it gives you more data and more insights on how you're deploying your policies and what you can actually see. So let's jump back into my console and see how far we can go. Mattias, how are we on time?
We are good, but we are close to finish now. We have to. Yeah.
We are close to finish. That is fine. So when I go into the configuration profiles, so I have a location policy in here. That location policy is a settings catalog. So as you can see, we have the option for to see how many devices actually got it. We can view the report, so we can get the details. If we go back to the assign status, this is from when I ran it the last time. So if I want a new report that is updated, this one is from earlier today, I can generate it again, and it will generate, even if I going back, it will still do it in the backend, and it will show me a message when it's done. But we can also, as you can see, it was generated, and I should have a new timestamp on my report. I still don't. I still only have one device inside my test group here. But for the per settings status, you can also go in and see if you have one settings, what is the success? Is there an error? Is there a conflict? And if there's a conflict, you can see which policy is doing a conflict with. If it has multiple values, you will be able to drill down to all of them. This policy, this reporting capabilities is in public preview, so there can be places where we are not showing this policy yet. Let's see if I should have one of those policies as well. The administrative templates, that is still showing the donut one, and therefore we don't have this option to drill down on the specific policy settings and so on. The plan is to move everything to the new reporting engine, and we will do it as fast as possible, even if you have a custom profile. So with the ADMX based policies for Chrome, more and more customers don't use custom policies, but we still have the option. So I have a policy with password, self-service password, and as you can see, that is also showing the new reporting options. I have a lot of errors on this one. I've been testing back and forward to actually create some errors, and again, I can see my specific settings, even if it's a custom policies. So this is our new reporting engine, and also for endpoint security, we had it on the new one where it's stating MDM and Microsoft Sense, but we don't have it on the MDM ones. So if you create a new policy, you will get the new reporting in the endpoint security plate as well. And I assume that in a couple of seconds, Mattias will say that I need to be finished.
We are there, Pierre, but we have a huge amount of questions, and I've already answered 23 of them. So thank you very much for the good questions. I have one question that I would like you to answer, actually, and that is from Stompler Sasha. What is the best way to align your settings between endpoint security baselines, templates, settings catalogs, and configuration profiles?
Yeah, to be honest, there is no good way of doing it today, and the MDM stack do not support config resolutions. We are getting feedback on it, and more and more customers is asking if we can get the same option as we have on DPO, where you can block or something like that. But today there is no option, but keep it simple. The customers that I work with, they create all of their security policies inside the endpoint security plate. Then they take the settings catalog for the rest, and they're only using templates for DCFI and kiosk profiles.
It's a great question, and with that last question,
unfortunately, there's not a good
there's
answer
no more
to
time. But thank you, Pierre, for a very, very great session. We will have in the next session here in the channel end-to-end workplace analytics in a single pane of glass and a prize top 10 that Angel is going to host. And then we have a sponsor for this session, and that sponsor is Minecore. So I'll give the words to myself. All right, so this is not a typical sponsor session. I'm going to speak into a little bit about the cloud attached clients, and Pierre was also alluding to WordStats. So how do we start this cloud journey? And Minecore, who are they? Now, how do we start? If we have configuration manager, we could start having tenant attach or co-management, or we could have both. If we have Active Directory, we would start setting up our new tenant. We would use AD Connect and sync up our users and start using all these Office 365 changes, cloud, which is fantastic. And then from there, we could enroll our devices into Intune. If we have other deployment system and want to go to Intune, then we would start to set up our tenant again, and we would enroll using DPOs. Now, if you have a new business, there's no reason to set up MDT or other config manager or other on-prem systems. I would recommend to go and buy the E3 license and have EMS and all that, which is included in that. If you want to know more on licenses, you can go to m365maps.com. I believe that is the address, and Aaron Dinesh from Microsoft have made it very easy to actually get a overview of licensing. Now to the cloud value, what do I get from cloud attach my environment? Well, if you tenant attach your environment, you will have obviously some good things in mind. You would have endpoint analytics, which you have out of the box from Microsoft Intune. The other thing is that you would have reporting capabilities into what is eligible in co-management. Now, if you want the full cloud experience, you would go ahead with co-management as well, where you actually enroll your device into Intune. Now, the tenant attach, it's not harmful in any way, because what really happens when you do tenant attach your environment is that it is going to upload all of your devices of your choice. Obviously, you can say, I want to upload all my devices, or you could just say, I want to upload the devices in this collection. So then you can have Lego, and you can just put in your devices you want to use tenant attach. So obviously, nothing is going on your client using tenant attach. It is only a proxy connection for help desk to actually do stuff on your devices on behalf of Config Manager. So the report I was talking about is this co-management eligibility. And if you use tenant attach, you can actually use this report to say, okay, there are some prerequisites for co-management to work. Now, if my device is not hybrid joined to Azure AD, then obviously you don't fulfill that prerequisite, and then you have the report to tell you so. So this is a very good report that is built into Microsoft Intune or Endpoint Admin Sensor, where you can actually evaluate on how it is going on with your devices. Now, if you want to co-manage your devices, and I recommend that you go the full Intune experience. I really love the product, and why not, if you're allowed to go to cloud, why not enroll your devices? You have these 7 workloads where we could play Lego. And what I usually do in a project, I build 7 collections to actually test before I do a full rollout. So what are the customers going for as one of the first workloads? Well, that would be compliance policies, because many of you are familiar with the expression zero trust. Now, zero trust is a way of minimize risk in your organization. So compliance policy is a way of marking your device to say, this is safe to use. And together with conditional access, which can block your users from your cloud services, that will be your first line of defense. So compliance policy will be one of the first workloads to move. Then we would play around with device configuration, endpoint protection, and resource access policies. Now, resource access policies are going to be not supported very soon. It is specified on the Microsoft Docs. So be aware that you do not, or if you do, set Wi-Fi profiles or VPN stuff from Config Manager. Now is the time to move away from that and co-manage your device and set this policy through Intune. Now, endpoint protection was the endpoint security blade that Pia was alluding to and showing. And we have a lot of goodness in that pane, and to be able to set these kind of protections, we move that workload. So it makes sense to have device configuration, endpoint protection, and resource access policies all in once. Now, moving client apps doesn't mean that you are going to leverage all your apps from Intune now. It just means that you can leverage applications from Intune. You will still be able to use Config Manager and all of your apps that you've been spending a lot of time building in your environment. The Windows Update policy is a huge way of saving time. Now, that is moving from an active approval to Windows Update for Business, where Microsoft say, I'm going to patch you by the policy you set on your devices. So if you want to save yourself a lot of trouble and time, you are going to want to enable Windows Update policies. That is a very, very nice way. And Office Click to Run is obviously where you have to install your Office Click to Run app. So there's no much into that workload. Now, in the co-management workload, we have possibilities to set all our workloads to pilot. And obviously, when we do that, we can add those to these collections. So the only thing you have to do is to put your devices into the collections, and then they will apply the workloads, and you are able to play with the policies or whatever workload you changed from Microsoft Intune. Once you've finalized your pilot and test and stuff, you want to move the slider to the right. Then you will have automatically your devices, once they go co-managed, will automatically get compliance signal from Intune, whether it's a part of the collection or not. Now, just to briefly touch upon MindCore, it's an expert house of Microsoft infrastructure, advisory and projects. We are around 25 specialists, most of them in a certain age with 25 years experience and more. And we really like to knowledge share, why we have a blog called blog.mindcore.com, or DK, sorry, and we have 60 plus customers. So great place to work. And currently we are holding 2 MVP, including myself. And yeah, really like to work here. And we are brought on the whole Microsoft stack, you could say. Now, if you want to get started on a certain technology, that could be Windows 365 or Modern Endpoint Management, which Pierre just took us through on the policy management. Could be Autopilot or some of the security stack of Microsoft 365. Then I would recommend you to go to our booth. There we have downloadable one sliders to go through how we could start such a journey. So you're welcome to reach out to either Jakob, Mattias, myself, and Rasmus, or else I would just say, go to the exhibit hall and visit the MindCore booth. Thank you so much for attending this course. If Sean is still here, maybe Pierre, if you are still here, you want to answer one question more. Otherwise, we'll shut down the session for the next event.
Yes, I can answer one more question.
Yeah, Sean Elegate. So to state clearly, sorry for the nagging, get the device uses on-prem and sync to Azure AD for MDM purposes. Use of outdated on-prem software and file shares is best done by VPN or RDS solution, correct?
That depends on what you're trying to accomplish, but yes, that is what customers is doing, and that is what we're doing inside Microsoft as well. But we have a clear recommendation that you should go for pure Azure AD joined devices, and you will have access to on-premise devices as on-premise services, as long as your identity is hybrid. So there's a difference between the hybrid identity for the user and the hybrid identity for the device. So a hybrid identity for the user, I assume that you will not get rid of that anytime soon, but the hybrid identity for the device is not a state a brand new device should go into.
Thank you very much, Pierre. And I'll try to answer the rest of the questions. It's absolutely amazing that you have come up with all these questions. So thank you very much, Pierre, again, for your time, and have a very good day.